Hello and welcome to the Physiology of Endurance Running podcast. I'm Owain. I'm joined by Dan. How's it going, Dan?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Owen. What are we? Time of recording, I think we're about 9 days out from Seville Marathon. Excited, looking forward to just running. Not much expectations, really. A bit of a hiccup of training in terms of an ankle injury, but now healthy and just looking forward to going to Spain and having a nice time and running as fast as I can. So yeah, I'm doing all right. How are things with you?
Good, yeah. Busy, but no, good, good, yeah. Yeah, lots of training as well. Wait, still trying to figure out what I'm doing next, running wise, but I don't know. Maybe some answers soon. Maybe I'll figure it out. I've got some ideas in my head, so
Well, I'm looking
yeah,
forward to hearing them.
yeah. But I cycled home tonight, and I actually needed sunglasses for about 2 minutes of it. There was actual sun, so that's a nice change. And when I was running this morning, actually, I didn't need my head torch for the second half, so that's we're getting there. We're almost daylight for both of my runs each day, which
Yeah,
would be
it's nice,
nice.
isn't it? Picking night up
Yeah,
from his childminder at 5 o'clock and it's light. That's nice.
yeah,
Just
it's
about
good.
light. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to quickly intro today or today's episode, we're talking to Phil from Meteopace. Meteopace is an app that when this releases, I think Dan is going to be refreshing nonstop before Seville. Um, yeah, I guess we sort of mentioned when we started talking to him, right? Like I think every runner has heard of Meteopace at this point. It's a really cool app that gives you weather. It takes weather data and maps it onto running performance. I think is maybe the elevator pitch. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's taking weather data, isn't it? But also terrain data of the race that you're taking on and effectively saying what's that worth versus the perfect conditions. So, 10 degrees, no wind, no humidity, completely flat, and going, right, what's the difference? And using that information to help pace your races. But you'll find out as you talk to Phil, it's just growing and growing and becoming incredibly more complicated and more functional and having more functionality. And I'm really excited to see where it goes in the next year, let alone 5, 10 years.
or even like Phil mentions, it was like April, May last year it launched. So like the growth is mad. Just the features like before we've started recording, we were just on the app and you saw the heat acclimation or acclimatization sort of tab,
Yeah, so
which
it's taken into account your heat exposure from training, so running outside in the heat, but also running on a treadmill. And then you can plug in things like you've been doing hot baths, you've been in the sauna, how long were you in for, what was the temperature, how did you find that, and using that information to set your level of acclimation to the heat, and then using that information to determine how well you're going to tolerate a 20-degree race day versus somebody who's not gone through that process. So it's just taking so much data. But I think one of the really enlightening things, well, I think two things. Firstly, how complicated the models Phil has generated are, but also his outlook on how you should be using that data is super interesting. That was one of the big takeaways for me. Like, how can we use this to actually calibrate our own feelings and just learn to pace better? So using it as a tool to just enhance your own abilities rather than just blindly following the numbers, which wasn't really something I expected from the interview, which was really enlightening and just Phil's obviously a really nice guy as well. I could be his best mate, definitely.
yeah, I think that's the. I mean, there's a point in this where me and Dan are just sort of like laughing because Phil's just gone down the rabbit holes that I think plague him maybe, or that he dives down and has dived down with the app. In terms of just some of the modeling that's going on, it's not just the weather like slapped in an app. There is so much going on in the background. But I think also like I don't know if you got the same impression. I think also like as more data, more models become available, whether that's weather or whether that's heat acclimatization or like other features that Phil's got coming. I just get the impression that if you said to Phil, "Oh, there's this like this could be, or this data says this," he would just change it because he just wants the best Like, you know, he wants you at the end and himself as well to have the best like experience and best knowledge. I don't want to say like guidelines, but you know, knowledge from the app. He's not like tied to anything in terms of like dogmas or, you know, like, oh, I've done this so that therefore it's correct. It's just always evolving as well, which is really cool. It's just
Yeah,
always, it can always be better.
having spoken to Phil for a good hour, I can't see an end point to this app. It's just
No.
going to evolve and evolve. There's no end point. There's no it's done, it's finished. He alluded to, I think it was off air, saying, oh, he wanted it to be done by December, but he's already listed 5 steps or 5 progressions he'd like to make over the next year. So I just can't see there being an end point, but it's already a fantastic tool and some really exciting developments coming as well, which he goes into at the end of the interview.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's you should go check this app out. There's a free version and there's a paid version, and really that's super useful. Go and check
And
it out.
check out their Instagram as well, because we sort of talk about some of the data they visualize on Instagram, especially like listening to this now. It's a few days from Seville. There will be a lot of information on their stories about how like weather modeling works before races. And I think that's when we sort of talk about how they show how inaccurate weather is at certain points before races, and then how you get the sort of tightening of the accuracy as you get closer. I think that's really important as well, just for, yeah, if you're, like he says, you know, don't look at the weather 2 weeks out from a race, because it's going to be pretty useless, just the way that the weather models work. So check them out on Instagram as well, because yeah, there's loads of, I think, I don't know, I'm biased. I love weather and map data, but loads of interesting information on there as well.
Yeah, really good stuff. Before we get into that interview, let's give a plug to our sponsor, Soar. Soar, the makers of really high-end running apparel. Go check out their website. It's suddenly got cold again, hasn't it? And I did my first session in, I think, this winter in tights, like the session tights. And I normally I'm shorts, and I'm normally either I'm going on the treadmill because it's too bad outside, or it's warm enough to run in shorts outside. But they are perfect, those session tights, and that they're just still got really good mobility, not too thick, so you can still like, you're not going to just end up boiling and regretting wearing them. Massive fan of them and their winter gloves. So I've got both just normal gloves and then the winter gloves. Incredible. The winter ones especially, they're just so much insulation there. And I get like Reynard's, really cold fingers, and yeah, just a really good investment. Even though it's, in theory, if we said warming up, still doesn't fit. I think it was 2 degrees when I was doing my intervals yesterday, or feels like 2 degrees.
Yeah, yeah. What was Meteopace saying? But yeah, yeah, agree. And also, like, yeah, you get a few weeks. You know, hopefully it gets a bit warmer in a few weeks, maybe. But then you also set up for next winter as well, right? So yeah, it's an investment for the future with Saw gear. It's actually going to still be in good condition for things like gloves when you pull them out of the cupboard in November. Or if you're like me, I normally start wearing a pair of gloves in sort of late September. Yeah, I have the Reynard's issue as well. So yeah, big fan of Saw. And yeah, thank you for the support, Saw, and go check them out.
Yeah,
Should we? Have you got
I'm
the
just
weather
looking
for
up on
you?
Meteopace. Apparently, it was 5 degrees, but feels like 1 degree with
There
the
you go.
wind chill. It was raining. Wet bulb temperature of 4 degrees. Yeah, it wasn't pleasant. Yeah. Other things to check out before we dive into the interview is Patreon. So we launched Patreon a few weeks ago. Thank you so much to all those who've signed up. We really appreciate it. There's one main series at the minute running, which is our training talk series, where myself, Jen, and Owen are talking through what we're up to. I've been documenting my build up to Seville. We've also got a new series coming, which I'm not going to release the details of quite yet, but an extra special guest is going to be joining myself on the build up to another race. And that's all I'm going to say for now. Other stuff up there, I've literally just today uploaded all of my physiology test data from the last 6 years, which was really nice for me to do, actually, and just organize it all in one place. But looking at those trends, because I think from the first test just before the first, or just after the first test, I ran 2:18:53 at Brighton Marathon. And fast forward to Valencia last year, 2:12:59. It's just really interesting looking at the trends in economy, like fat and carb oxidation rates. So I'm trying to put things up like that on there. So extra bits of information or resources that you'll find useful and interesting. So you can go see all that on Patreon. If you don't want to commit to a full monthly subscription, then you can also just buy a single episode, or you go buy my test data and have a look through that in your own time with my commentary of the trends that I see in it as well. So go check that out. There'll be a link in our show notes. And other than that, I think just enjoy this interview with Phil. Definitely going to be, I know it's only February, but it's going to be one of my top 3 for the year interviews, I think.
Yeah, really good interview, and catch everyone next time. So we're really excited today to be joined by Phil from Meteopace, probably my favorite running app, I reckon. I think probably Dan's as well at the moment. We're really excited to talk to Phil about the app and about modeling weather, about maybe some of the impact he's seen it have on runners. Phil, you are a runner yourself. I've got you a power of 10 here. 2:49 marathon?
Just about, yeah. Just about.
Yeah, where was that? London?
That was, London 2024. So I swear there's a 2:45, 2:46 in there at some stage, but I need to get over my hamstring cramps.
Have you put that result back into like Meteopace and seen what the app gives you?
Yeah, of course I have. Yeah, of course I have. Unfortunately, it doesn't give me a lot. It was a pretty good day. No wind. So. Yeah.
For our listeners, Phil, would you be able to just give us a brief description of what the app is? Because I think most people who haven't been living under a rock have seen it or seen reference to it on Strava posts or on podcasts, and we've talked about it, of course, on ours. Could you, for those who have been living under a rock, could you just tell us briefly what Meteopace is, what it does?
Yep. Yeah, so in a nutshell, if you're training for a race, if you've got something coming up, Meteopace takes the weather data for the event window, exactly what you're running, and it'll then translate those weather impacts and the course impacts, so the elevation along the course, and it'll translate that into what impact it will have on an idealized pace based on your target pace that you hit. So it'll deliver that to say, this is how you should adjust your pacing plan over the course of a marathon or a 10K or whatever race you have, so that you can plan and expect what you should adjust your pace into accordingly. So yeah, trying to prevent the anxiety that I think every runner has the week before a marathon when they're stressing out if the weather's going to be bad, to something actionable, what you can actually expect and plan to do with it.
Yeah, we were just talking off air before we started recording. Owain blocked the Instagram page so he could live in a hole before Valencia and not know what was going on. So he could just live in denial, which that was how he took the stress out of it. But
yeah, that's one way of dealing with it. But it doesn't go away, right?
No. And I think coming out with something actionable, like you said, is the most important thing. Is you can't control the weather, but you can control your pacing, and that gives you a great tool to go about. Coming up with a really good action plan.
And that's kind of the thing, really. I found myself just, the week before, I'm looking at every weather service. I'm trying to find the one which tells me the one I want to see. And then I try to work out what I do with it. But, the key thing is there's a lot of if you set your expectations at the right level, you kind of realize your own expectations. So if you have this rigid plan that says, I'm going to hit this pace because that's my target pace, and the conditions hit you mid-race or wind along here, and you somehow don't realize your expectations, those anxieties and those things that start to break your decisions along the course start hitting you. You're like, okay, I've got to catch it back, or what do I do? And then everything goes out of the window pretty quick, and you've just spent 3 months training the house down for this one big day, and then you just take decisions that you would regret afterwards. So yeah, it's trying to prepare you to what's happening so you can visualize it, and then give you a plan on how to deal with it when it comes.
That was one of our big talking points after London Marathon in 2025, wasn't it, Dan? That Dan had a couple of athletes that even or negative split the race, and there was a good number of people that ran it well, and then there was a lot of people that just ran the plan that they had, like you said, 3 months before. You know, they had a goal in mind and just went for it, and then afterwards there was, you know, some of them were like, oh well, it was hot, and they didn't make any effort to actually adjust, just went with the plan. And I think that's what Meteopace really visualizes like quite nicely, especially when you add in things like wind as well, and like when you show like the map of the race and like where there's going to be a headwind and a tailwind, like that visualization of how it's actually going to impact you is really useful as well.
Yeah, I think it's just quite difficult actually. Like London was a really, really good one. I was there because my wife was racing, and if you just looked at the forecast, it didn't look that bad. So like the few days before, I think it was like 15, 16, which is not horrific. But the big thing was in London, it was really still. And it was, with London being a later start time, the sun's up and the radiation, the sun power was crazy that day. So what you see on the temperatures is the temperature in the shade, but you're running, you know, in bare sun, just getting cooked the whole time. And if you're not aware of all these things, if you feel it and you know, hey, I just slow down because it's hot, then you slow down. But if you say, hey, if you've convinced yourself it's not that bad of conditions, that I'm sticking to plan, then you're going to pay for it, because those small decisions early are going to really kick you later on in the race, you know?
Yeah, and you can't fight the conditions. Like we know from so many studies that your physiology, you can't fight that. And that is so much influenced by the environmental conditions. And if you don't adjust, obviously you're going to have a bad day and get a performance that was not reflective of your current fitness. And I've always come out of a race, if I executed the race well, I can take a lot of satisfaction in that. Even if I didn't get the time I necessarily wanted. And the good thing also about Meteopace is you can go back afterwards and say, well, what was that worth in perfect conditions?
Yeah.
Which you can't write that on your power of 10, but actually that does give you confidence going forward. But you can
that's a little bit. It's a really good point, because, you know, the goal isn't to say, hey, you actually ran this time. It's more to say, hey, this is what it was worth, so that, hey, if you need to go again because the conditions were bad, maybe this is where you dial yourself in at. I think, you know, with it also helps you try to see, when you look at it versus your actual splits, you know, where you made bad decisions, because you really want the Meteo adjusted pace to be even throughout the race. Whereas if you see your map also changing throughout the race, it's a good indicator that pace instability is also not there. So it tells you both things. It tells you, one, how much difference was it to what you actually ran, to what the conditions were worth, and then how well did you actually execute an even cost run.
I think we'd really love to get into the mechanism of how you're using that data to drive those outputs. But before that, I'd like to just know how did Meteopace come about? Like, was it a problem you saw? You've obviously a runner, so I'm guessing you were a runner before you got into data and analysis and app construction, or was it the other way around? I don't know. I'd love to just hear the backstory.
No. So, look, my background is, I'm an engineer, so I'm not a physiologist. I'm an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and you know, the day-to-day life is solving problems. So you're trying to build models, abstract data from everywhere, and then find a solution to it. I took up running maybe 15 years ago, got really into it, and you quite quickly, when you start running, want to work out, how do I get better? So you get locked into all the tech that as a mid-20s guy does, who spends their way into faster times. And then I was, trying to work out, how do I pace myself when I race? And this anxiety of trying to nail what the weather was going to do, and then how I'm going to manage my pace in a half or a marathon, was just like this constant loop I was going through. I spent so much time trying to work out, okay, how do I do it? How should I plan my splits to adapt with the hills? How do I, how do I, should I use heart rate? So I did a couple of marathons where I just tried to track the heart rate. How do I use power? So I've tried power to try to manage it. And all of them are to the point where I was more and more reflecting, these are the things I'm actually running to what the watch is saying, not to what I'm saying. So the watch is controlling me. Like the pace is the thing I'm aiming for, not, or the heart rate is the thing I'm aiming for to try to hold it, rather than running and then the heart rate or the pace being just what it is, you know? So more and more I was like, hey, other people must be dealing with this problem. And maybe 6 years ago, no, longer than that, 9 years ago, we moved out to Austria. So we were living in Austria and I was doing tons more trail races. That gets you completely out of the pacing problem, because you say, hey, I don't need to worry about even cost on flat. You can you learn to just run by how it feels, you know. When you're constantly changing elevation, you much quicker learn how to run by feel. So then when I went back to marathon training, I was like much more trying to work out, how do I equalize this cost to give myself confidence? So yeah, then I just started building something basically for myself, and then thought, oh, other people might find it useful. A few of my friends started using it. I had like a web version, and then I was like, let's do something, let's build it. So I just had to build an app that did it. That's essentially it.
What year did the app launch?
Last April. So
You seem to
yeah,
be taking over the world. I mean, like I said at the start, we've heard references everywhere to Meteopace, and yeah, I said we're big fans, and every day I'm seeing more and more people, because it syncs with Strava, and you can get like a nice traffic light system of what the temperature, what the wind was like, and what the performance effect was, and you just keep seeing that on everyone's profiles popping up, which is super cool to see it spreading. I mean, you've obviously nailed the pacing. I'm looking at your marathon, your last 3 marathons here on Power of 10, 250.
Oh, you don't have to split.
You're very consistent there, so you're definitely executing well.
Or just a lack of improvement potential, you know.
Wow, yeah, too busy building apps, I hear.
I cocked up on one of them actually. I think it was Manchester. I completely went by heart rate, and then there was a bit of a headwind on the way back, and went way too hard, and I was on for 2:46, or a few minutes better, and yeah, it wasn't a major blow up, but you know, enough of a blow up to upset me in the last few games.
Was the website that you sort of built for your friends, did that take into account like weather and everything, or was that sort of built around some other data?
That was actually more originally based on trail running, so it's more elevation, and there was a ton of experimental features which I still look to work out what to do with, like the terrain. Like over here, I live in Switzerland. Over here, the trails, they have like a grading on them, that you know how rocky they are, or that you know the detail of the terrain. So I was thinking how to model that. I ended up going down a bit of a segue trying to work out how to do that. So yeah, there's many different things to try to correlate back to running. Like if it's windy, how much time should it take off? And then the more time you spend on those problems, the deeper down the rabbit hole you go to say, okay, it's not as simple as I first thought when you first do the initial model, that, you know, just because the wind on the forecast says this does not mean really anything for how you run, unless you know course, surface terrain, how to translate it down. Yeah, it gets super complicated.
Yeah, I mean, like I used to, you know, before I got the Meteopace app, I would just use like Windy, like the website to, and I'd just be like, okay, because especially in Cardiff, like if you're running into the wind across the barrage, across the bay, it's pretty horrible. So even I would just do a regular loop around the bay, and I'd go and look, okay, which direction is the wind going? Okay, I'll go the direction that reflects that as best I can. So
Yeah.
but like you say, like okay, so I know the wind is sort of the prevailing wind, but actually how that impacts because of buildings and the actual terrain is completely different as well.
Yeah, where it's coming off, what it's coming onto, what's surrounding you. Yeah, it gets complicated.
So you're getting a lot of inputs. So you preload for most of the big races. You're preloading the course into the app, but I think you can add the course yourself, right? If it's not one of the big races.
Yeah.
So it's obviously taking the terrain into account, and then it's pulling a lot of data from like weather apps. Is it? How are you collecting the weather data? Where's that coming from?
It depends on where you are in the world, honestly. So wherever you can get the national Met Office. So for example, in the UK, you take the Met Office data. Wherever you can get that data, that's streamed straight in. And then typically, if you can't get the national weather, I would then default to Apple weather. So it's the same as what Strava use basically. It's like a good blend of different national and local models. So that's the first like parameter to pull in is like, what's the data that you can get? So what's free, like available for your area? And then once you have that, that's like for me, what I'm trying to do in the background for big races is look at how much variability these models are spitting out. So, like depending on the time away from when your race is. So for one example, before a race, don't typically show the forecast before 6 days. So if you look on Apple, if you look on any weather app, you'll always see up to like 14, 10 days. But honestly, if you look at the real error of the weather simulation that far out, it's normally not as good as what the historical weather's going to say, unless there's a stable weather pattern. So you're trying to work out with all the variability of the models, what's the likely situation going to happen, and when does it become statistically tighter that this is likely going to happen. That's more for big races. In general, you just take the best model you can, and then stick what you get in there. And then there's a series of techniques to then downscale that weather into the runner. So you imagine the runner's like a body that's separate to the weather that you get, and then translate it to how that impacts them.
I think but before I mean I saw the post on other accounts, but before I blocked the account before Valencia, like one of the graphics you put up, which is so good, was like showing like just how this like error expands as you like. I think like 7 days out, like you can just see it like expanding, and then like over the days before the race, like your band of like where the temperature was going to be was sort of like narrowing each day, which just like visualizes that error that happens, and that happens with just like general weather forecasting, right? Like, like thousands of runs of models, and this is what might happen. This is what's happening most of the time. But I know whenever there's like a big storm in the UK, and like the Met Office YouTube will show like how they're modeling it. Like, in some of the models it hits Scotland, and in other models it hits Cornwall. Like that's
that's the reality.
That's what it's showing.
I think before Berlin, I was looking at 4 different models, like commercial ones, and then the German service, and the radars all had different like patches of rain coming in. Like there was no rain that day, but the radars were showing different options for what could happen hours before. So there's a natural error in just how chaotic weather is, that you can get so good, pretty good, but the goal isn't to now create another more accurate rigid plan here. So like a rigid plan is not the goal. The goal is to create the idea that you say you need to be able to adapt. So the pace is going to vary if you want to hold a constant cost through your race. And then this is giving you directional, like, what can you expect when you start to sum up all all the errors, what can you actually expect, so that you start to set the right mindset of how you should approach the race.
In terms of then like a practical like takeaway for people who are using the app, when would you be making your decisions around pacing? Like in terms of when the model is going to be the most accurate? Are you looking at the evening before or the morning of, or can you be a bit further out than that? What would you say?
I would say, I mean, I'll take an example for you, right? So you're going to race Seville. I would ignore it until it really is stable, which is typically within 48 hours. Within 48 hours, you're pretty high confidence of what's going to happen. Still, things can change, but within 48 hours is when I would start to set the expectations. Before that might give you an indication. There's still quite a lot of movement. It doesn't add a lot of value in my mind to try to now look at variation that is far enough away that you can't control. So 48 hours is when I would probably say is the ideal time to, if you need to, I don't know, get some different electrolytes or change your fueling plan, then that would be the time I would do it. And then typically I would, if I were you, I would be getting the splits as soon as possible before I'm about to race, because things can change.
Yeah.
So I'll get my initial judgment 48 hours, and then as close as I felt comfortable without creating additional stress that this is it, try to create
just
don't look at
it. Don't look at the Met Office 2 weeks out and go, yeah, we're doomed, or actually it's gonna be a great day. Yeah.
I mean, everyone knows it. You look at it and it will change anyway. So, yeah. I mean, at least with the marathon, you have 4 hours before having your breakfast that you have time to be able to check it and sort it. So that's the time I would do.
Do you analyze the recorded conditions afterwards, or is it? Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I'm sure I remember seeing changes even in the 24 hours after race day.
Yeah.
Actually, things have changed a bit in terms of what that performance was actually worth.
Yeah. So typically the forecast model itself is improving as it is. So imagine that the forecast model is improving as more observed weather data is fed into it. So what it expected to be at given locations, and then what they actually were, and then you reevaluate the simulation, and that spits out a revised forecast. So the forecast is improving every day as the observed weather data trailing behind it happens. And then once you get to a certain point, you get a much better analysis when you have the actual observed weather. And the observed weather isn't necessarily for your location. It wasn't just because there's observed weather doesn't mean that at where you ran there is observed weather. But wherever that is, the model is reevaluated to understand, okay, this is based on what happened. This is the likely situation.
Yeah, that observed bit's maybe an important point, right? Like, I know when you look at the weather for Cardiff, if you look at a weather station, it's like Cardiff Airport, which is actually, again, nowhere near the city, and probably has its own like microclimate, to be honest, because it's right by the sea, and some hills between there and Cardiff. So that's maybe another important thing. Like, if you're in the middle of a city, the observation station might not be right in the middle. Like, chances are it's probably at an airport, right? Like, that seems to be where a lot of them end up being.
I mean, maybe there's a difference though. So you're not looking at what the weather was for that station. It's still correlated back to location. So most of them will adjust for cities where there's a heat island in the city. So it is then re-biased again for what they're expected. And most of the cities will have sensors in the city as well, trying to understand what's going on. I mean, you can definitely find it. I mean, the core thing I would probably say is trying to get more accurate with the weather is not the goal. I mean, the reality is it will not be correct. There is so much microclimate going on around wherever you are that the best thing that you can do is be broadly right with what's going on and give a good direction for what you should then do about it. If you take wind, for example, if you feel it on every run, right? You don't feel a steady wind that the forecast says, but you're looking at what an average is. And when you then statistically take that over the period of 2, 3, 4 kilometers, you will receive that load, but the instantaneous wind that you see is not pure, you know? See, in the end, it's a statistical assessment of what you should then do, not an instantaneous assessment of in that moment. You're looking for precision. You just will never achieve it. It's way too complicated, way too chaotic. There's too many things that are going to change.
So just on the wind impacts, I guess one of the other features of the app is the sort of current training as well. So like I've got the app open, so you can see what the weather's doing like now and how that's going to impact. If you go out, so I've got the app open now. If I go out for a run now, apparently it's a 2% like wind impact.
Yeah.
And one of my questions with that, just as someone that does use this, is that assuming I just like run in a straight line, or is that just if I end up going in a circle and end up back where I started across?
Yeah, I think there's an info tab on the button that should tell you that. It should be, imagine you're running in a circle and averaging out the wind. So it basically says you will hit bigger impacts than that if your headwind will be more like 5%, and then tailwind will be better, and it will average net out at 2. So you try to even the cost, because in the end I have no idea where you're going to run. So you try to even it out. And then the key thing is, I think everybody knows it, but you don't get as much back from the tailwind as you got hit by the headwind, which is why it's always net positive. Unless you're running downwind and you're point to point, you're typically going to get, or the other way, it could be negative if the wind is changing throughout the duration of your run. So if the wind is flipping, then it might give you a negative based on its assumption of which direction you run in. But if it starts to do that, you would argue it's going to be chaotic, right?
I mean, one of the bits I'm most interested in is what models have you used to determine the effects of, for example, a 10-kilometer-an-hour wind on someone's cost of running? How have you processed that data? What models have you used there to? How have you gone about constructing that model? I guess.
How deep do you want to go? I mean, look, aerodynamically, it's not incredibly complicated. There's lots of studies for wind cost. So like aerodynamic cost of a single runner into a wind tunnel and what effect that will have. But the reality is that you need to translate that's not the hard bit. The model to calculate the wind impacts on a runner based on the course direction is fairly, standard aerodynamics. The more tricky bit is working out what is the data that you get from the weather service down to the runner to translate what, if depending on the location that they're in, what would they likely receive. So then you start to open up into statistics. So based on, I won't go into too much detail how, but use maybe 4 layers which are used. 2 satellite layers where you take along your run, taking satellite imagery to work out what type of terrain it is and categorize it somehow to determine, based on the wind coming from one direction, how likely is the what's called the shear of the ground going to hit you on. So that's the first thing. If you're anywhere outside a built-up environment, that's the main thing, is shear reduction. So if it's coming off the water, it'll be super fast. You'll get pretty much all of the wind that you see on the forecast. If you're in an open field, it's a little bit lower. If you're in the forest, it's completely nothing, or really 20% maybe of the wind that you get. If you're in a city, then things get more complicated. So then in a city, you start to consider how wide the roads are, how high the buildings are, and then you use 2 other metadata sources to try to calculate, based on your running angle, based on the wind direction, what's the likelihood of turbulence, street canyoning wind. It starts to get super complicated.
I can already tell it's getting super complicated. I think I hadn't even considered in terms of the level of it. You've thought about this. I can see what keeps you up at night or until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, so like quite early building it, I had a quite good model for this terrain, but I was really struggling with the urban environment. Like, it's really difficult. And then I was on a call with Nick Earle, and he basically recommended this paper from this British guy for how they model cities and how wind works in cities. And he's like, that's where you need to go and look. That will help you. And then you go in there, and then I was, okay, I can build something now from this, rather than my approach was going to be try to build a simple aerodynamic model of a city, which was going to get extremely complicated. So yeah, no, there's been super help from different people to suggest different techniques to try to get, in the end, better statistical accuracy of what you're going to get. It's like I said, it's not exact, but it's going to be much more accurate than when you just look at your phone and you see it's windy. So like a good example would be, depending on where you are, Owen, it'll be trying to categorize the location that you're in. So where I live is built up, but very quickly I'm into an open area. So I know it'll tell me a reduced wind number on the plan, but then I would just add the route in, and then it would be able to work out effectively.
It must be processing so much data. Because we haven't even talked about temperature yet, and I think that'd be great to move on to next, because obviously we know temperature's got a big impact on performance, especially like in the longer events. But your Meteopace is in the pro version. You can then, what am I trying to say? It counts for your heat acclimatization. So actually, what have you been exposed to on your training? But then you can also input things like you've been doing hot baths, you've been in the sauna. That must again just add so much more complexity to the model.
Yeah, and it starts again. The first starting model is simple, right? You can look up any paper and work out what an average. Every paper will tell you what average heat does to a marathon performance, but what there's very limited data on. It's going beyond that. How do you respond dynamically to heat? And what I mean by that is, I start a race and it's 12 degrees and I finish and it's 18. How do I respond during the race to that? And because I don't care about what the total impact is as much as I care about how to pace according to the temperature ramp. And then, there's everyone responds differently to heat. So there's the individualization of your weight. There's the individualization of how much you've been exposed to heat throughout your general day-to-day training. So if you're training every day outdoors, and it's, if you're in Australia at the moment, you could get some serious heat adaptation just from your training. And whilst, there's a lot of talk about heat training with the performance benefit, but just the acute benefits of training in the heat to then be able to respond better in the heat is really massive. I think for most people, if you want to mitigate a hot race, that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do, is not try to get the performance gains of higher VO2, but just be better adapted to how you respond to the heat.
Yeah, because I guess compared to wind, I imagine it's reasonably there's not much variation between people. If you're running into a 30-kilometer wind, then
So the main thing with wind then is really like tactically, like how likely is it you're going to be able to run in a pack? If you don't think you're going to be able to run in a pack, you don't want to turn the drafting mode on. So there's a drafting mode in the app that allows you to turn on a reduction of the wind impact that you're going to feel, because you're sat behind someone, so you're not going to be exposed. So you try to, there is an element of your strategy, how are you going to run it? If some people like to run at the front, then you're going to pay for it. Someone's got to do it.
With I guess just on the heat as well, like is there like a sort of a data point, especially for that you're using, like you see in papers like wet bulb globe temperature, which is just sort of goes beyond just general temperature, right? It takes into account other variables. Is there like a main number that sort of, or main piece of data that drives then how much you're saying like the heat is going to impact in a race?
Yeah, I mean, it goes quite a bit beyond that, in my opinion. So if you look at the standard measures that we have that we can take, you can extract this wet bulb globe temperature fairly easily. So it's basically a composite of temperature in the shade, how temperature would respond with wind and humidity, this wet bulb, and then it's basically a black bulb that manages solar. So it's trying to add the three factors together into one composite temperature, which is mainly then used to look at heat stress. But for me, doesn't always, it's the best variable that links to performance, but it doesn't predict performance. So where it fails is like in really humid conditions, it's actually, you will not see as big an impact when you start to correlate. Same with super hot races where you're very exposed from the sun. It also doesn't track so well. So I think, yes, it's a really good indicator. That's why, it's shown in the app that you can look at it, because it's a good, I don't know, like layman's way to understand what's going on.
It's much better than just looking at the reported temperature.
Yeah, exactly.
Wind and humidity, right? And
radiation. Most people would then take dew point, right? So dew point is effectively giving you this idea of how effective the humidity is. What wet bulb is similar, but it's also including the wind. So it's how much convective cooling or heat you're going to get. So how humid it is and how windy it is will show how quickly it evaporates from the bulb. So they're way better than just shade temperature. And then the sunlight is the other big one. I mean, you know it instinctively. If you run in the shade on a cool morning versus you run in the sun, it's completely different heat load, because you just have pure radiation that's warming you up.
Yeah, we talked about this even at Valencia, like just psychology wise, like the last 2K at Valencia, you turned and you're just running straight into the sun. And like I had sunglasses on and it was still like bright and I like couldn't see, you knew there were spectators there, you couldn't see anyone. Like we talked about with Dan, like Dan didn't have sunglasses on, you're just running straight into the sun, which I think,
just
maybe
his eyes.
That is literally what he's doing. Yeah, he's just squinting. But like it's going to play an impact, isn't it? Like I think just instinctively as like a, really a creature that was built to be outside, right? Like you just going into the sun, it's just, you're going to feel the heat a bit more, aren't you? Like, I mean, I guess that's hard to model, but it's a fact.
I mean, effectively, there's only what? Conduction, convection, and radiation. Well, there's probably another that I'm missing. So how to heat something, but the sun is just directly radiating against your skin, and it is heating you up. So it is adding to your heat load that you're storing, right? It's happening, and then it's going to be correlated to the air temperature, because the same radiation is also heating up the air, which is what you then measure in the shade, which is giving you the temperature that you see. So they're correlated. But they can be a lot higher if you then feel the direct sun, as in the exposure or the heat gains that you're taking are much higher than if it's cloudy. But yeah, I mean, in the end, you're trying to balance how much heat you're producing versus how much heat you can get rid of and how much heat you're taking in. So you have this equation that you're just trying to balance all three. You can get rid of more if you train yourself to get rid of more. That's like the heat adaptation. You can evaporate the heat off you through sweating more. You can't stop taking it in unless you wear less and you take more convective cooling from you. So yeah, and then you're going to produce it's a huge amount of your energy production when you're running is going just straight into heat. I think like everything you read is like 80%, 75-80% of the energy you're producing is being stored as heat that you're trying to get rid of. You take that over long duration.
Yeah, us humans aren't very efficient, but again, that's why your app is fantastic. Because one of the best tools we have is the pacing and controlling intensity, because if we're running at a slower pace, then we're going to produce less heat, and that is going to help you tolerate higher
Yeah,
temperatures better again. So having an idea of how much you need to adjust before you go into a race
yeah,
is really useful.
yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me. Uh, how do you use the app in your day-to-day training, and how do you think people, what do you think of the biggest uses? Do you see it as purely for race day, or do you think people can make more use of it by incorporating it into their training a bit more holistically?
Yeah, I mean, um, aside from the obvious weather and then what it's going to do to my run, so I would use it just to, if I'm just instinctively, what's it going to do without trying to think about all the variables. So the plan page, trying to just see what I should do for my running and giving a insight into just basically don't stress about the pace. This is my key learning, right? Just don't stress about the pace. The pace is the outcome, not the target. And then from a then evaluation, it's really what I've been finding more and more. Oh, and one of the reasons why I started to build it is to try to get some level of calibrating feel back to what I think that it was really worth, if that makes sense. So maybe I give an example. Like if you go and do a session and I have a riverbank that's kind of in the middle of the valley, and I can run out for 6-8 minutes and then I can run back. And I know it's slightly uphill on the way back, and I know I get a wind in one way. And I try not to then worry about the pace and just try to feel what it should feel like, and then evaluate it afterwards if the map is in line with what I expected. So I'm trying to use it more of a tool to calibrate feel back to where map is, because that's ultimately how I want to race. How I want to race is not to use pace. I want to use how I feel, and then cross check it to the splits that I see, because
Well, I
I
love the
should know what
message.
it feels like.
Yeah, not chasing the splits and going more off
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
that is
exactly.
the outcome.
Yeah,
You pace a marathon the best you can
yeah,
off of effort, and the pace is what it is. You
exactly.
can't do anything to influence that. You just need to have a measured energy expenditure across the race and reach exhaustion at the finish line. So
Yeah, but
actually, trying to chase paces doesn't work very well. If you
exactly.
uh,
And like
you
since
see
when I
it.
started,
Yeah.
sorry, go.
I mean, you see it with any major marathon, don't you? That there's a massive train of people trying to break
Yeah,
3 hours. And so there's so many people on the 3 hour pacer, but a lot of
yeah,
those people, what is the probability that, 5% of a field should be on the 3 hour pacer? Like pretty low. It should be obviously a normal distribution curve, but everyone's on that
yeah,
three
yeah.
hour pacer to go sub three. And actually they're there because they want to run sub three, obviously, but most of them should either be able to run faster or slower than that. So a lot of them are going to blow up and
Well,
haven't
I
listened to
think
their body, basically.
I just think it's how it's just normal, right? Since I've been running, I've always had a GPS watch, so I've always trained to pace. Like, and the training plans I've had historically have been, you know, 8 miles at goal marathon pace. So like, it drives a lot of anxiety in training when you're training to a pace that you can't hit, or that you can't evaluate how to adapt to it. And I think that, trying to actually learn what the pace should feel like, or what an effort should feel like, at least for me, I found I didn't really know what it should feel like. I knew what I needed to do to get the watch to fit. And then I would be happy if the heart rate was lower than I would expect. And then I would calibrate. Yeah, it's all good. But, I had it like, I think it was a couple of years ago. You'll probably see it on my Power 10. You'll see now my ambitions for a race. Where it was a half marathon where I was trying to hit like marathon effort. And in my head, marathon effort, I had an idea what pace I wanted to hit and then how I was going to race it. And my wife was using that race to try to do get a London Championships place. So she was like stressed about the outcome. Was for me, it was a low deal. Anyway, she ended up forgetting her watch, so we only had one watch, and we weren't running together. So I had basically gave her mine, and I had to then run this race without a watch. Never done it, and then it started stressing me out. I was like, how do you do it? How do you how do you actually just run to marathon effort? And then like very quickly you learn quite quick that you know it quite well, and it actually gives you a lot more confidence without then being judged by the coming up on your watch that told you it was this or that. You just end up just running to feel, and then actually I probably kicked down a bit too hard at the end, but yeah, it was really, really, really good because over the whole time I'd been running, I don't think I'd really done that. It'd just been constantly training to the watch. So I think like learning that, and I think learning that for me in the future is one of the values of what the tool can do, because it is really trying to help you realize the pace is all over the place. It's fine, and try to learn what the adjusted pace should then feel like.
And I guess that leads on to like, are there like mistakes you see people making with the app, or like things where you're like, oh, maybe it wasn't built for that? Does anything pop up, or I guess
Yeah,
at the same time, a lot of it's
there's plenty
just
of
positive
use
things
cases
using it.
that there's plenty of use cases that like using it for cycling or um, I think the biggest mistake that people make is to think it's like the truth, or that if this didn't happen then everything's broken. And that's kind of like, it shouldn't be just another more accurate rigid plan. It's trying to support you in seeing a fixed pace plan is not the correct way, unless you've got perfect conditions, perfectly flat. That really you have a flexible plan, and then it should allow you. It should teach you to say, "Hey, it's going to adapt." And you see that when you train as well. You see the difference sometimes in the forecast versus what you experienced. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means it should help you. It should train you to think, "Okay, it's broadly right, but in sometimes I need to learn how to adjust manually." That's like, or the other big one is, you know, miscalculating what your target pace is in the first place. Like, just because you put your target pace doesn't mean that you were fit enough to run that. Do you know what I mean? So just because this now gives you an adjusted pace doesn't mean you were ever fit enough to realize your target pace anyway. So yeah, like I said, it's not a performance oracle. It's just there it should be there as to help guide your intuition on race day or in training.
I mean, I'll be honest, Phil. I'm quite. I'm pleasantly surprised. I thought you'd be coming in and going, not that this is the gospel of truth and that you do just the letter, but the fact that you're a big data guy and you're saying just use the data to calibrate your own feel, basically,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
sort of the
yeah.
message that we're preaching as well. I mean, like in terms of we're in our own training, we're using heart rate, we're using
Yeah,
lactate, but primarily I think that is a great tool just to calibrate, well, how hard does this feel? Like, is this sustainable or is it not sustainable?
yeah, yeah.
And
I
using
think
data, not just not following the data blindly, using that to educate yourself.
yeah, 100%. You know, like I listen to you, Dan, and I think, yeah, I all I spend my time doing is like writing Python scripts or doing Excel sheets of what I think I can do. Like, I love the data behind it, but the reality is that it's so complicated. The physiology is so complicated. The external conditions that you're better really focusing on things that you control, like your muscles or your breathing. Like, these are things that are happening that you can stay in control of, and that when you let something else drive you, you realize why am I letting that happen? You know. So yeah, it's kind of for me that's the big thing that I've learned through my time running, honestly, is that not to over rely on the data, but use it as the huge support. Which I think runners have always done in the end, right? So if you look back in history, like the guys that use Phil the most were also the guys that were documenting everything about their training, like all the details, every last little bit. But then when it comes to racing or training, it's pure Phil, you know.
I
think
ultimately think it makes it a less stressful experience just for training and the racing. You are not obsessing about what your Garmin's going to say on your next time it beeps like 5k into your marathon. Have I gone 2 seconds a k too quick or too slow?
Yeah.
Or that there's going to be variation there, and actually, well, how does it feel? Like, what's everything else telling you, rather than just your watch beeping?
Yeah. Well, it's the same for heart rate. I mean, you know it. If you hit the first few K a little bit hot on pace, your heart rate's going to jump because your adrenaline's, you have people weaving around all over the place. You see a few beats too high, straight into panic mode of like, hey, what do I do? Like my whole marathon's gone down the drain, and I think it's easy to overreact because we've got so much information, you know.
I think on that sort of stress as well, and one of the other, I guess, maybe side things that like Meteopace is really good at, again, on the social media is like showing the historical trends of races, and to your point about people picking the time or target and just going with it. Like I remember thinking before Valencia, like, you know, when it was like, okay, it's going to be a bit hotter than is ideal, but I think now people like book races and expect perfect weather, and it's not always going to be perfect weather, is it? Like I think you go to Valencia, and yeah, you might have absolutely perfect, you know, best marathon conditions ever, but really you just want a good day. Like that's and like the weather last year in December was still a pretty good day to run, but because it wasn't 5 degrees and no clouds in the sky and no wind, it was like the world was ending. And I think just showing the historical data, and then also how it impacts. Because if you believe people, like they'd say like, oh, Valencia was like 10-15 minutes slower than in reality it's like a minute or two sort of thing.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think there's actually, I think it was today, there was a really good study came out on global, all the majors and potential change of start times because of the predictability over the next 15 years, what the likelihood of ideal race conditions are. And I'm like, this is it. You're going to get the conditions that you get. Like that's the reality, right? And I would be lying if I said I don't try to choose the flattest possible course with the best possible stable conditions, because you want the time in the end. Like there's no denying that. But the reality is, if you then realize and you get to race day, you can't control it. There's like nothing you can do. Either you bail out of the race completely and you pop and go again, or you try to salvage. And to be honest, that's also one of the cool things that I get feedback is you just get a new target. But let's say, for example, I had a PB 2 days before. Meteopace just gives you a new target to hit because it says this is actually the realistic target for today. So then you've got something else to aim at, you know? Then your other one is still equivalent, but you've just got a new line. I know it's meaningless because everyone wants the PB, but at least for your confidence and for your execution and for your own mental well-being, it's better.
And just to anchor yourself to something more realistic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to readjust your aims, and actually you're still going to have a good time and go out and try and beat other people around you. And you know, you can always play the game of, well, you know, normally if I don't know what the numbers are, 4,000 people, 2,000 people run sub 3 hours at London. Can I be in the top 2,000 or whatever?
Exactly. So your relative performance, good execution is a good result, I think, you know.
I think ultimately in a marathon, if you can come away having executed well, then you could be pleased with your performance. You can't have done any more. If you've even paced it or pretty close to even paced it, and you were 10 out of 10 effort at the end, well, you've done all you can do. So
exactly.
Time is what it is.
Exactly. But and also I think it's also important, right, that that you just race to enjoy it as well. Like it's, I know it sounds a bit, you want to get some good times in, but in the end, like just training to get a good race and enjoying it and having a good challenge is also, and maybe I'm a bit older, so I'm a bit, my PBs are not as attainable anymore, so I'm happy to not push as hard, but
But speaking of new challenges, then what's coming up in your own running? Have you set yourself any targets? Have you got any mountain races out in Switzerland to go? Go do?
So I've I'm running in Geneva Marathon in May, which honestly is a bit warmer than I would like, but should be good. Should be good. And then I do a good ultra in summer as well. Round I'll butcher it, is Montreux, so east of Lake Geneva as well. So
Nice.
this one is I don't know. I like to do sort of spring marathon, trail running in the summer, and then recover in the spring and autumn. Here it's just like sometimes in the winter you just cannot train. I had a treadmill until a few weeks ago, until it broke, and now I'm just in the ice trying to survive.
And what about for? Go on, Owen.
I was going to say, I think same question. Is there anything coming up in Meteopace that people should be looking forward to?
Yes, hopefully. So we've got a watch sync function coming for Garmin and for Coros. So what it means is that if you have a pace plan that Meteopace produces, the goal isn't that you remember all of your 1 kilometer splits. And honestly, I think the best way is, in my mind, would be to take something like 5 kilometers, 3 kilometers, whatever, take a chunk. And then if you want to know are you on track to what you wanted to achieve and what the realistic plan would achieve, it sends those splits to your watch as a manual lap that it will tell you then what's the next split time, what type of lap pace you could be expecting, so that you have some anchor rather than trying to remember all the splits. It's kind of like a modern pace band that is adapted to the conditions just before your race. So the goal is that it would be refreshing before the race, and then you sync it, send it to your watch, and then it's an alternative then to know where you were planning to be.
I mean, that'd be super useful, especially for those races where I've got more variability in them. Not like a Valencia, which actually is completely flat. The wind wasn't that strong. The main thing is the heat, which is not going to change the splits. It's going to be systematically change the splits rather than introduce lots of variability. And I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the key. Yeah. I think the thing is for those is, without going down a massive tangent on pacing, like moderate heat is it sneaks up on you because you can't really feel it. Most people struggle to feel like the 13 to 15 to 16 degrees, but towards the end it hits. So having a good indication of when you want to be, how you want to be degrading your pace over the race as it's heating up and the sun's coming up, I think it's quite good to know, because it is almost going to be, in a lot of cases, it's almost going to be linear reduction, because it's gradually impacting you as you're exposed for a longer time as the sun is coming. So I think is actually, even in moderate conditions, I still think it's useful. When you don't have anything, then even split it out.
Yeah. No, it's really that'd be a very exciting thing to get going, and if it makes it more user friendly.
Yeah, I think it's more I think it just helps you take something that gives you confidence in the race. The goal is reduce anxiety, give someone confidence to race their best, and then if this is telling you that there's variability, then it's giving you a signal, hey, we're kind of on track to where we expect it to be. And then the second thing I'm trying to work through is a little bit what I was saying, this pace, execution quality. So how stable is the map when you're doing a session? So let's say you got a marathon pace session. I think what you want to train yourself is marathon effort. And I really like the discussion on when people say a race distance effort, because the effort's changing throughout the race, right? So what does it even mean? So trying to create, based on when you're doing the run, getting a better feel for where the map is, so what the meteo adjusted pace would be, and you try to keep that even rather than keeping the pace even. So it still gives you some reflection back after the event, how good a quality your pacing was relative to what you wanted to do, and how stable is your effort as you're increasing the duration of the block that you're doing. I think that's something I think is quite hard for people at the moment, other than heart rate. You just take heart rate, but then in your session that you're doing 20 miles and you do 8 miles of marathon pace at the back end, you're not keeping the heart rate down. It's going to start climbing, and you don't want to back off. So yeah, the problem.
No, again, that's really really interesting, and again goes back to that idea of it's a tool to help make you be able to just pace by yourself better in the future. If you can then go back and assess yourself relative to your how even it was relative to your map pacing. It's such a good app. I've only got one last question, Phil, and that is it just you? Are you Meteopace? Is that the whole team, or have you got other people
No, there's
supporting you in other than Nico?
Yeah. There is my wife also supports as well. We're a bit of a tag team on the majority, and then testing wise, there's a few good people who help out. So, but on the building, on the getting stuff out, it's typically myself and my wife. So she's a better relative runner than me. So good to ask how things are, and then she does a lot more of the writing and like preparing the races and supporting that way.
Yeah, no, it's super impressive what you've built. And again, I said earlier, but the graphics on your Instagram again are such good. Just for a lover of graphs and data, like they're
I'm hoping to get more of that in the app, and then more of it, like race selection, that you just have this data more accessible. That I build it from something that's standard anyway on my side, but I want to be able to get more people that can just use that anyway. For whatever the race is, that you see the variability, because that for me is the important thing, right? This is not fixed. You want to see that, hey, this is changing. Don't worry, don't stress out. There's many things that can still happen. I see it that way. So, and then also like comparing races as well. There's plenty of options to help people with what their plans are.
Cool. I think no more for me. Did you have any more?
No. I thank you so much, Phil, for giving up your time, giving up your evening.
Hey, no worries.
We're excited to have you on for ages, so I'm so glad that you said yes and came to spread the good word of Meteopace.
Hey, no, big thank you to you guys. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate just interest, and then what you do now, trying to help communicate the value in what I'm doing. So, thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks, Phil.